Welcome to Massive Passive Cash Flow, the podcast that guides professionals to financial prosperity. Join our community and let's start building your wealth. Here's your host, Gary Wilson.
Welcome back to the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. I'm Gary Wilson, your host. I'm glad to have you back listening or watching the show, whichever the case is. We appreciate you taking this out of your time and out of your day to do this. And you're going to get a great show today. We've got Hannah Hammond on from beautiful Arizona. And she and I are two peas from a pod. So she's an investor. She owns and runs a brokerage company called The Firm. And she also has some other projects she's working on that we can talk about. So first off, Hannah, thank you for joining us. I know how busy you are, and I know that means we're lucky to have you on the show. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here and look forward to chatting with you.
You got it. So first thing is, I love the fact that you're in Arizona because it's, the Phoenix area, the last generation has experienced massive growth, huge turn down during the Great Recession 12 to 14 years ago. But just like any good area and any good investor, we never give up. And neither did the area. The area's bounced back in a big way, still growing massively. And you're just right there in the middle of it. You're in a beautiful, beautiful part of, east of Phoenix, of course. But if you wouldn't mind, give us some story, give us some backstory. Like, how did you actually get to where you are? Was there a pivotal moment where you said, you know what, I don't want to be a lawyer or a doctor or accountant, whatever our parents wanted us to be, and you're going to do your thing and be the entrepreneur and fly like a bird? Was there something that inspired you to do that? Maybe a friend or relative, or tell us about that if you don't mind.
Yeah. So I was born and raised here in Arizona, third generation native. And my great grandmother was a cotton picker, and we had no money in our family for multiple generations, just lower income for sure. No one was educated. No one went to college. Nobody was an entrepreneur. My dad still works for minimum wage at a pawn shop, and my mom was a bagger at the grocery store. So that was really the initial motivation for me as a really young kid. Was I had a couple friends that were wealthier, and their parents were business owners, and they had really nice houses and different lives. And I was very drawn to that type of lifestyle versus the lifestyle that we had, which was fine. It was just a lower income environment for sure. So that was the initial spark. And then luckily I was born into an age of technology and resources, and I started reading books and researching online on how to build wealth, and everything pointed to real estate and entrepreneurship. And so the first book I read was Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And that was the initial spark to my interest in going down the path of real estate and entrepreneurship. And he's now a good friend of mine, which is amazing. But
yeah. And he lives out where you live too. So
yeah. We're basically neighbors.
He's definitely been an integral part of a lot of people's success. That's for sure. And I'm one of them. And when he first came out with his first book, I read it, and then I got the Cash Flow Quadrant, and I think 27 books, the training program. Believe it or not, back then it was actually cassettes, I think. I probably still have it somewhere. Yeah. And then fast forward, after building businesses and buying lots of properties, I actually got to spend a day with him in Lake Tahoe at a conference. And I had dinner with him and everything. And what was really cool is this, and I'm going to have you talk about this too. I actually started buying real estate and building a portfolio. But where I ended up, Hannah, was building businesses related to real estate, leveraging my platform of the properties. That was like the launch pad to allow me to build businesses. And I'm running over this with him. He says, no, you're doing it exactly right. He says, you're on the right side of the quadrant. You're a business builder and you're an investor. And he said, you're leveraging or investing to build businesses. And I started selling him. He said, yeah, you're doing that right too. It just really helped because when you're an entrepreneur, a lot of times you're like out in front, you're in the vanguard making decisions for yourself for the first time. And it might feel right and look right, but you don't know until you do it. And having somebody like him kind of in your back pocket is a major, major benefit. So in any case, back to you. So take us from there. What was your first endeavor in real estate investing? I mean, a lot of people do flipping because they think I'll make a lot of money flipping and then I'll buy rentals. I was like the opposite. I did rentals first before I ever started flipping. And it seems like I'm always the oddball that way, but tell us about your experience, if you don't mind,
I was exactly like you. I did rentals first, and always was a holder, always was a buyer. I think I got that from Robert as well, is just keep buying and never sell. But that's what I did. So I signed up for real estate school on my 18th birthday. I worked really hard in high school so I could get a full ride scholarship to college. I still wanted to go to college, so I had just the experience and to have that on my resume. And in case I went the corporate route, I wanted to be able to go that route. I picked engineering because it was the highest paying, hardest degree in the shortest amount of time, where I wouldn't have to go into debt because I didn't have college funds for law school or anything like that. And then I knew that it would allow me to just be able to stay local, get my license right away, and be in a real estate market that I knew and understood because I'd been raised here in Arizona. So I got my real estate license. I held an open house in my neighborhood, and one person showed up to the open house and ended up listing his $1.1 million commercial property with me, which I sold, and I used that commission to buy my first property. And that's how I got started. The first property I bought was $76,900. It's a 1-bedroom townhome in a really nice area. And I renovated the property, used some additional funds to open up a stock brokerage account, and got into the stock trading space for a little bit, which was not my forte. Everything I touched turns to downhill. But anyway, so that's how that started. And then I just started selling more real estate, and then bought my second property, and then leased the first one out fully furnished. So I was kind of doing fully furnished rentals 10 years ago, before Airbnb was really a big thing. And it was super, super lucrative back then. Right now, it's a little bit of a soft market out here just because there's so much saturation. But that's what I did. And I just continued to do that, buying a bigger property each time. And then ultimately, eventually getting into, multifamily, and now in storage facilities, mobile home parks, and small bay industrial.
Excellent. So you're in all the right asset classes. It's amazing the common ground between all of us across the country. And I think it's because the population is just increasing so rapidly, partly internal growth and also some external, immigrants coming in, because we're all immigrants at one point or another. But having that residential combined with some other asset classes really gives you a lot of, risk protection when the market moves. It goes up, down, whatever. We don't care. Because we always have a strategy. Now, so you started building a real estate portfolio, and at some point, I guess you built the brokerage, and you also built a lending company. Is that with the two? Tell us what happened next. Was it the brokerage and then lending, or is it the other way around?
Yeah, so it was the brokerage and then lending. And the reason I got into that was, so I got my license at 18 years old, and I've been selling real estate casually, like many people do, for the past 10 years. I didn't get full time into selling real estate and launch my brokerage until January 1 of 2022. So I'm about 2.5 years in of being like, hey, I am full time a commercial broker and a hard money lender, and I'm owning and running my brokerage. I'm the designated brokerage and owner of that company. So prior to then, I had started some construction companies. I was an engineer for CAT for about 1.5 years right out of college. Learned and kind of saw the operations of how a $1 billion company was built and ran, and helped optimize that company. And then I went on and started my own construction companies, from general contracting, roofing, and glass specialties, and had about 75 employees across those companies. And, in my head, I had this big grand dream of, I'm going to have the construction in-house. I'm going to buy the multifamily in-house and the property management in-house, and just kind of do everything myself. I really quickly found out that I did not love the construction world. And that's when I decided to step down from the construction world, and gave my partner ownership of those companies and had an exit out of those. And then I started the real estate brokerage and the lending company at that point. The brokerage was first. The lending company I started about 6 months later.
Yeah. Now, all right. So now the brokerage, you had your license with another company, obviously, first. And when you launch your brokerage, you do it. You're the sole owner. And did you start? The reason I'm asking this question is we have a lot of people on my team and listeners who are actually branching out and building their own teams, and I help them build their own training programs, build other businesses like lending and property management. And for me, it was property management. And looking back, and that's where all the gray hair came from. So I'm not saying it's not profitable. It's just a lot of work. It is, and it's no fun. There's, nobody ever calls you, Hannah, saying, "Gee, Hannah, gee, Gary, I'm so glad you're my property manager. No, it's always bad news. The water tank busted, the roof's leaking, the neighbor's dog's barking, all that stuff. But so with brokerage, what was your, looking back, what would you say was your biggest challenge building the brokerage?
So the initial desire that I had in opening the brokerage was simply I couldn't find a brokerage that could solve the problems that I was having in my business and that I was looking for. And what I mean by that is I had this residential business that I had slowly built up over the course of 8 years. And I had this commercial business that I had slowly built up over the course of 8 years. And I didn't want to let go of one or the other. And brokerages out here in Arizona, and I think I could say so nationally as well, most brokerages, they're commercial or they're residential. And even if they have two divisions, they don't allow you to do both. You have to do either commercial or you have to do residential. Yep. And I just didn't like being siloed into one or the other. And I really wanted to continue to do both. And I have the skill sets to do both. And I'm very good at both. And so that was the initial drive, is I wanted a luxury brand that, really beautiful looking brand. I wanted, all the technology that the big brokerages offered. I wanted the ability to do commercial and actually have respect from commercial, because that's a difficult thing in the commercial space when you're trying to get involved. Mm-hmm. And then also that ability to do residential as well. And that's how the firm was ultimately born. And we've stayed pretty boutique over the past couple of years. It's just been my network that's come to me and come aboard the firm family, but I haven't done any sort of recruiting or anything like that, because the main mission was to support my own business and then to help others who are having similar problems or had similar needs in the space as far as it came to residential and commercial real estate.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I'm just making a note here because I'm going to probably invite you to come teach one of my Monday Night Live segments.
Awesome.
Everything you're saying is exactly. Yeah. This podcast is obviously one directional to classes. You're going to have people ask questions. It's very engaging. And we just had one last night. It was absolute barnstormer. I mean, people are still calling today.
Oh, cool.
Recordings and stuff. But yeah, so I love to teach. I mean, it's just when I was younger, I always wondered why are people teaching this stuff if they're making so much money? Why wouldn't they just keep doing that? And the answer is, you get to a certain point. It's like, it's not that you couldn't use more or don't want more, and that all entrepreneurs, we always want to grow more, but there's something about growing through others. Like when you can, it's like Zig Ziglar said, if you can help enough other people get what they want, you already got plenty of what you want. So most people evolve it. I think just the way the way you carry yourself, the way you speak, the way you build your businesses, I'm pretty sure you're a good teacher too. And I bet you with your clients, you do a lot of educating, right? I mean, people come to you, wanting to look at a building, or like, I don't really know, I've never done one like this. I bet you can walk them through that process. So tell us, do you feel like you're teaching as much as actually, being a transaction agent? You're actually educating your clients too?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because when I first got my real estate license, I didn't have the desire to be a real estate agent. I wanted to be an investor, and I wanted to get licensed so I had the tools and resources and knowledge and networks to be the best real estate investor that I could be. And then people started seeing my success and they're like, how are you doing this? What did you do? How'd you find this property? How'd you analyze the property? What's your exit strategy? How much money did you make? And so naturally people just started coming to me and I started teaching. And that's when I started doing some one-on-one coaching, and it became really fulfilling to me. And it also helped me learn and grow more. Like as I teach, it ingrains it more into my own skill set. And then it also, sometimes I teach and I realize I haven't been taking this advice, or I've kind of, fallen off the path of what my own knowledge is, of what I know are best practices. And it helps remind me too, and sharpen my tools in my toolbox, and just become a better investor, a better broker, a better lender, and just a better deal maker all around. And so I find a lot of fulfillment out of it. And I would have loved to have a mentor growing up that wasn't an author in a book. Like an actual community, an actual in-person teacher would have been awesome to have. And I didn't start getting into things like the Commercial Academy or some of these bigger networking groups, entrepreneurial groups, until pretty recently in my life. So if I could pass that back, I'd just love to do that.
Did you know that you can participate in class every Monday? We call it Monday Night Live, 7 p.m. Eastern, with me and dozens of other investor agents from around the country, in fact, the world. Every Monday, totally free. no selling, no recruiting, just straight up education on anything and everything in real estate. And we have a lot of good guests coming on once or twice a month, bringing in expertise on subjects like how to buy a house with crypto. Okay. How about them apples? What about AI? How's AI affecting our business? How about the metaverse, blockchain processing? We're already using it in title work. So come on to Monday Night Live, be ready to take notes and ask questions because it's live and engaging, and you get to participate by asking questions and meeting others. So we'll see you there. Go to realestateWithGaryWilson.com, click on the resource tab, drop down, and you'll see Monday Night Live. And in there, you can see one of the most recent classes. But more importantly, you can register for class as many as you want going up to like the end of the year, I believe. So in any case, do that. We'll see you on Monday Night Live. Look forward to meeting you in person. Take care. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, being part of masterminds, I mean, for me, it's been a huge part of my success. And it's hard to articulate to people who've never been part of one because a lot of times they do cost money, but there are some free ones. And the reality is you're not going to go there and meet somebody and make $1 million the next day. But what you're going to do is meet several people. You're going to be able to share with them your experience. It's going to help them. They're going to share with you their experience. It's going to help you. And every now and then, I'm sure you've had this happen, you get that one golden nugget, just like, man, that's the thing I've been needing and looking for. And it just happens. You can't plan for it. It just happens when it's meant to happen. It could be 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, but it's worth it. Everybody here listening, just listen to Hannah and, network, be part of a community, whether it's online or offline, however you can do that. I can't emphasize enough how important it is. So on your brokerage, it's called The Firm, which I love the name. And you mentioned it's a boutique. So do you have other agents on there? Is it solo, Hannah 100%? Or do you have other people you're helping to provide service to the local community and learn themselves too?
Yeah. So we have about 20 agents at the brokerage.
Okay.
And I would say 15 of them are mostly residential. And then we have 5 that are mostly commercial. And then a couple that do a little bit of both. That's what draws a lot of people over who we have, is because they want that ability to do both, or they maybe want to learn commercial and they know I'm willing to teach them. And we have a mentorship program to teach commercial. And we don't silo based on asset classes or location either, which commercial brokerages do. They're like, hey, you have to be, a retail tenant rep, Scottsdale, Phoenix, and you're on this team and you've got all these big crazy splits and stuff like that. So I have a very different model for the brokerage. We're more of a very low split model, and it's your business and you have the right to sell or represent whoever you'd like in that space. So that's kind of the size of our brokerage. I would like to grow more commercial agents and focus more on that and find the right partner to kind of help manage the growth there. And that's my plan with that. And then either acquisitions in-house, like actually buy commercial real estate with our fund that we have. And then, if it's not a good deal for us, then the agents can list the properties themselves and broker the deal. So kind of be a one-stop shop for clients.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, speaking of money and lending, let's talk about that because, tell us about your experience first with your own investing. When it came to money, like a lot of people think when they first start, well, I'm just going to put down 20% and get a conventional mortgage for the other 80% because they're easy, right? But then you quickly realize when you become what the banks call a player, you have so many properties, you're going to have to get commercial mortgages, which is exactly what happened to me. Then I started getting private money. So what was your journey there? And I want people to remember the money is like the blood flowing through your veins or the gas for a car. You have to have it. In order to have it and use it wisely, you've got to stay strong and healthy and efficient. You've got to have kind of a lean, mean, operating machine, so to speak. Because if you do, you're not going to have a problem getting the money. And if you don't, people are going to sniff it out. They'll read your financial statements and realize you got some challenges to solve. But take us through your journey when it comes to the money. And then I understand you're involved with that now. So you have do you raise funds or let me just turn it over to you and let you talk about that, Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So initially I made my own money, bought my first property, like many people do, owner occupied loan, get I was putting 20% down. I never wanted to be over leveraged. I was always fearful of losing it all and having to restart. And so I took good risks, but I took calculated risks, and I always made sure I had enough equity in the game. And at this time I was 18 years old. So I definitely wasn't raising any money. I didn't know anybody that had any money. And I didn't have the confidence to even go down that route. So it was my own money. And then I, sold some more real estate, made some more money, was able to buy another property and then rent that one out. And then that's what started building up my cash flow. And I really repeated that process until I had to start going the private money route, which is how I got into lending. And, then I started realizing, okay, well, if I'm buying these properties at this point, I was making a lot of money and I wasn't wanting to pay taxes on that money legally. So I was doing all the cost segregation and the depreciation and write-offs and things for my businesses. So at that point, I no longer really qualified for traditional financing. And I had exhausted the amount of loans I could have anyway on traditional owner-occupied financing. And that's when I found a really awesome hard money lender. He was just this wealthy older gentleman who had retired, and he would just lend on real estate deals, single family homes or small multifamily, and just charge 1% interest per month. And he would let you have the money for, 6 months, 12 months, 3 months, 24 months, pretty short-term loans. And I was like, wow, this is really awesome. And he said he absolutely loved it. And he had very low, default rates, and it had just been a really great program for him, and he'd been doing it for many years. And that's what put the bug in my head about lending. And I had done some personal loans to family and friends in the past before I started the lending company, which I opened up Cashed, which was my hard money lending company, and now is a debt fund. We do raise investor capital. It's called HB Capital. And that's more commercial asset focused bridge lending, like $1 to $25 million. But that's initially how I got into the lending business. And, I've done personal loans for people. Like, I have a loan out right now. The guy was buying another property. He needed $50,000 for the down payment. And it was a leverage property, but he owned 3 other properties that I was able to collateralize, 3 other investment properties. And so I would lend, $50,000, and I would charge $5,000 a month for that money. And the investor would just keep it for generally, 2 to 6 months, just very short-term loans at very high interest. So that's a little niche that I really love. I love doubling my money every year. Who wouldn't, right? But that's not really a scalable model because it's very high interest, very short-term, high volume. And that's why ultimately I decided it'd be best to launch a fund where I could raise investor capital from accredited investors and build that fund, hopefully to $1 billion fund is my goal.
Nice. So, do you leverage the firm? And so, and by the way, the lending is your change. It's rebranding from Cash to HP Capital. Is that right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
It's not really.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, Cash I'll still own, and I'll still do what I was talking about, the niche loan products, more like business loans and stuff like that. That's just my own personal money, so that entity will still be around. But HB Capital is the actual debt fund that is a commercial hard money lending company, bridge loans for commercial assets and some residential as well.
Okay, so HB Capital, then it sounds like you'll be able to use that alongside the firm, your brokerage company. The two can obviously support each other, refer back and forth, and things like that. Brilliant. Now, have you thought about other ventures? Like I mentioned, property management before, but our title company, anything like that. The only reason I'm asking is I did it, but after a few years, I realized I'm really not making more money per hour. I'm just spreading myself further and further wide and thin. It was great because we were growing, and it was a great source of leads from one entity to another. But at the end of the day, it turns out when I consolidated, going right back to straight up investing, working with investors, running a team like a brokerage, and just that was our thing. That's what we did. That's what we're good at. Eventually it took off, and it was like a rocket. I mean, I just hit that tipping point. So on your vision, what's your vision going forward? Here we are, election year. We've had a few years of rapidly rising prices, followed by 2 years of rate increases. There's uncertainty. There's a couple of, some people consider them all out wars around the world. They are wars, but they're not on our soil, thank goodness, right now. But what are you looking at going forward? What's your vision include?
I am a serial entrepreneur, and not
Mhm.
chasing a shiny object, i.e. opening more companies, is very difficult for me. And it's been a challenge for me to stay focused for a long time. I think a lot of my fellow entrepreneurs suffer from that disease as well. But
Mhm.
I I don't know if you follow Alex Hermosi. He's one of my favorites, but he
Mhm.
talks about the woman in the red dress, which for entrepreneurs is like the other business opportunity, or the property management company and the title company and all of these things. And he talks about his experience where he had his company and then he went off and he started his tech company. And right when he did that, the gym company stopped growing and the tech company started growing. And then, they were both growing, but not at crazy levels. And then when he sold the tech company, then the gym company started doubling in growth. And so it really just goes to say, like, where you put your time and attention is going to be where you become the expert. And when you're the number one at anything, your results are far larger than linear. They're not just linear to be the 50th best in the industry. So, like, if you have two companies that you're pretty good with both companies, but neither of them are, like, you're not number one in either of them, then you're probably going to make less money than if you doubled down on one and became the best in that one company. So, like, the best brokerage or the best hard money lender or the best multifamily investor, versus being like, oh yeah, I have an AI fund, I have a tech fund, I have a multifamily fund, I've got a title company and all these things. You might make a decent amount of money, but you're probably going to give up a lot of opportunity and a lot of ultimate results than if you really
Right.
focus that attention into one company and stopped chasing the women in the red dress. So that's what I'm trying to
Yeah.
do. I intend to only have the brokerage and only have the lending company. And I'm actually, in an ideal world, I would find a partner to really manage the operations of the brokerage. I'm a big believer in Who Not How, one of my favorite books by
Yeah.
Dan Sullivan. And
Yeah.
just that allows you to scale more, right? It's just, if you have the right strategic alliances and partnerships to be the who in these companies, then you can still have equity in them and really focus on your one thing and let the other who manage and scale those companies, which is what I'm in a position to do now. And I've been approached by a big client of mine, big investor
Mhm.
client, to open up a property management division under my brokerage. And if he's going to completely manage it, completely run it, completely do everything, then that's a venture that I would entertain and take an equity portion of, but I wouldn't have any role in it.
Yeah. Well, I love the fact that you mentioned Dan Sullivan. I actually used to live in Toronto and then a town called London, Ontario, about 2 hours outside of Toronto for several years, and coached with him in whatever the advanced program was, and got to meet some awesome people. And his goal was, of course, to write 100 books, and he was at number 25 or something when I was in the program. And Who Not How was one of the later ones to come out. And
Yeah.
great program, great guy. And if you ever get a chance to go up there, I recommend it. And he's got an awesome house right there on Lake Ontario. But in any case, the coaching, that message is so critical, because a lot of people, when they hire, they're focusing on the role, which is important. You got to define the role, but instead of figuring out the how, find the person who fits the role, and then they'll figure out the how. I mean,
Mhm.
that's really what it's all about. But well, let's talk a little bit about the where we are right now. So you're in Arizona, and I'm sure you recognize a lot of what you do, a lot of what you learn, a lot of what you teach. Those fundamentals never really change. A market may change. One market could be different from another market. Even asset classes. What's a good class today might not be a good class tomorrow, and things like that. Um, but as far as geography, have you looked at other areas, or can anybody, like, say somebody's in Toronto and they want to invest in Phoenix, which I'm sure you see because a lot of Canadians like to come down there. Um, can they participate with you? Can they utilize your brokerage services and also the money? A lot of Canadians are concerned about that because they're in Canada. A lot of U.S. lenders won't lend to them, but I'm telling you, they're awesome people. But as far as the where go geography, kind of a two-part question: can people from out of the country work with you? And number two is inside the country, are there other markets that you maybe have your sights on too for ownership, asset ownership?
Yeah. So yes, Canadians and out of country investors can invest in our debt fund, and we do an 80%, 20% profit share with them. So any upside I make as the GP, me and my partner make as the GP, they get 80% of all the revenues and the profits of the company. So it's really awesome. We're always trying to do things to maximize profits. And generally, our target returns for investors is at least 10%. And we invest our own money in the fund as well, because that's who gets most of the profits is the LPs, not the GPs. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
or fortunately, depending on how you look at it. But so that's definitely possible. And yes, we do on the brokerage level, we do have clients from out of country all the time, and we could help them whether they're selling or buying real estate here. Just got to deal with the little tax nuances, which is pretty easy once you get used to it. We can't lend outside of the US yet with our debt fund. So we can only lend on assets that are based in the US. But they can be a Canadian citizen if they're buying an asset here and we're lending on that asset, and that's totally fine.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, I know we're getting close on time here, but any final thoughts or even like a favorite lesson you learned from, a grandparent, for example, or your favorite, or Robert Kiyosaki or Dan Sullivan, anything you want to share wisdom wise. And I always ask people to recommend one of your favorite books, and then let's go over your contact information, how people can reach you.
Yeah. So obviously increase your assets and decrease your liabilities, and let your assets pay for your liabilities. And that was key to me when I was getting started. And I lived by that rule from Robert Kiyosaki and the Rich Dad Poor Dad principles for many years, where every dollar I made, I would invest that into assets. I would live very, very frugally, and I would build up that passive income and build up that equity and real value in the property, which was adding to my net worth. And I would only buy things for myself with my passive income, which we all know in real estate, it takes a while. It's a time game. Like it's hard to build up a significant amount of passive income where you could actually live off of it. But once I, had over 6 figures of passive income from my rentals, that's when I started to actually buy myself something other than ramen noodles and start to live my life a little bit. So I was very disciplined in that principle, and I'm very glad that I did. And just the equity appreciation of those over time has, made well into the millions mark. So that's what I would say. And also his book is really great, Rich Dad's Guide to Investing, and all the Dan Sullivan books and Ben Hardy is awesome. 10x versus 10x is easier than 2x in those ones. As far as as far as how to get a hold of me, the best way to get a hold of me is either just shoot me an email, hannah@hbcapitalre.com is my direct email, or DM me on Instagram. I'm really active on Instagram, and it's just at Hannah B. Hammond. And that's probably the best route to get a straight shot to me. And I don't know if you had another question there, if I missed anything.
No, you cover the book, how to get a hold of you. And I really, by the way, I really appreciate you sharing so much, because you gave a lot of golden nuggets today, and also people. So everybody listening, if you replay this, you're going to recognize not only a pattern. Hannah's obviously successful. She's accomplished. She clearly is an entrepreneur. There's a pattern that we generally follow in growth, and you can see her path, the progress she's made, and the journey she's taken. Starting, I'm not against college. I went to college too, got a college degree in computer science, and I did use it at first, and I still use it now, because that learning how to think critically and analytically and abstractly, like your degree in engineering, it serves you well, and mine serves me well. And I've met a lot of people, Hannah, who have degrees like this that really do well with this, because it's almost like math. It's either right or wrong. There's not like a gray area in math. It's either right or wrong.
Right.
And if you stick with the discipline, that's another thing about like with your degree, you do have to be disciplined to get a degree. And when you use it, like when you work for CAT, clearly, that running a successful business like CAT requires a lot of discipline, sticking with the game plan, not wavering, not get caught up in a lot of shiny objects. Like you said, keeping expenses down. We call it, maximizing upside potential and minimizing downside risk. And if you can always keep that philosophy in mind, and just don't waver from it, you're going to be successful. So yeah, and thanks for sharing all that. And thanks for listeners, for you listening, and please leave a review, especially for this one. Maybe your reviews mean the world to us podcasters. It's what makes the world go around. We get to meet awesome people like Hannah. Doesn't cost anything, but your review allows us to get more juice from the search engines and things like that. That's why we appreciate it. So thank you, Hannah, again. Thank you, everybody listening. Take care of yourselves. God bless you and your loved ones, and we will see you on the next Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Massive Passive Cash Flow. Be sure to go to realestatewithgarywilson.com to join our community and start building wealth today.